Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, this is Christina Lopez. I'm an enrollment strategy leader and founder of the Dean's Desk. I spent 20 years in admissions and financial aid, most recently as Dean of Enrollment Management at Barnard College, with previous roles at New York University. Today, I help families evaluate the true financial fit of every college on their students' list before they apply.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good afternoon, friends. I am very excited this morning. First of all, I'm pretty stoked about the feedback we've been receiving from our 3 new initiatives: the improved website, the relaunch, the basically new Instagram page. We haven't had Instagram in 5 years, and the brand new YouTube channel. And so I'm pretty exhilarated, pretty inspired, and I'm inspired by the constructive feedback as well. Now, the feedback that says it's really helping me, I love that. I'm totally motivated by helping people. That's just how I was raised. That's what my mom did. That's what my dad did. They're both educators. My grandmother's an educator. My sister's an educator. My niece is an educator. Both my nieces are educators. My daughters, that's what we are in our family, and we get great joy from that. So that part's great. But the constructive feedback's also been helpful. Laura gave feedback about adding dates to some of the interviews and college spotlights. That was a great idea. We've had some constructive feedback on how we can improve the YouTube channel. We got some feedback about, that music you played on that one video, don't play that again. Just don't play that again. And then we also had some feedback on the fact that when the YouTube videos were breaking away to photos, the photo was staying up for 1 second. It was jumping right back. Let it stay up there a little bit so it's not so jumpy. We've implemented that feedback recently, just now, but moving forward will be better. And then just this week, we heard some feedback, a couple people actually, you're too zoomed in. The head size are taking up the whole screen. So hopefully that's corrected moving forward. So whether you've given, as they say at KIP, adjusting or affirming feedback, thank you for all of the feedback on our 3 new initiatives. Now, before I get into today's episode, I totally have dropped the ball. So it was probably 5 or 6 weeks ago, I announced all these receptions that we're doing, traveling around. And I'll be totally honest with you, I forgot about them. So they're all on, but I'm going to get that sign-up sheet up. As soon as I finalize this podcast, I'm going to get those sign-up sheets up. So they'll be up by the middle of the week. So we are in Minneapolis on the 6th of October. That is the only one that's up right now. That should be a really good one because there's a lot of admission leaders coming in for the national conference. And there should be a lot of fun. Just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, see the events page. That one's up. By the middle of the week, we have a lunch in Madison, Wisconsin. That should be up. When I say a lunchtime gathering, not a lunch, a lunchtime gathering. So let me correct that. Madison, Wisconsin on the 11th, which is a Sunday of October. All these are October dates. The very next day, we have an evening event in Chicago on the 12th. And the very next day, the 13th, we have an evening event in Hinsdale, Illinois. And we are going to do an event in Raleigh-Durham. We've already got the location confirmed, the host confirmed. Just working on a couple technical details before I can share that with you. But you will definitely be hearing about an event in the can't remember if it went for the first week of November or the last week in October. But I know for sure we're doing an event there. And there's 2 more possible events. We're considering doing an event in the Nashville area. That would be October 2nd. And once again, this events can just be a restaurant gathering with a few families. That's also fine. Those are a lot of fun too. I've been doing some of them as well. It doesn't have to be a big, reception at a location. We just grab a restaurant, a few families, and chat, talk college admissions. Like, I can't get enough of this stuff. Then it's fun meeting listeners. And then we're also looking at doing more of an evening restaurant gathering in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, also on October 11th. So reach out to me if you have any interest in those events, either coming as an attendee or hosting, either one. Once again, let me repeat the two that we still have not confirmed yet. The others are all confirmed. That would be the Nashville area on October 2nd. That could be any time from lunch on. I'll be in Nashville almost that whole entire day. And then on the 11th in Milwaukee, that one would need to be later because we are doing a lunchtime gathering in the Madison area. So reach out to me. Text me at 404-664-4340. Text me at 404-664-4340. I'm a texter. Sorry, I'm a big kid at heart. All right, on today's episode, interim host Chris Terr is back, and he joins me to answer a question from a dad from Denver in our question from a listener section. I'll have a YouTube update. Then Christina joins me for the final part in our interview with Andrea Saadi. And as you know, if you've heard the previous parts, we're talking about how you can self-assess to a certain extent, but how you can learn from some of the tools that are out there, whether colleges are stable or not financially. And so I've got good feedback on that interview. I'm looking forward to you guys hearing the final part. But before we dive into today's content, so I'm going to share something with you guys about interviews. Usually some planning goes into our interviews when I interview a thought leader. Not everything all fleshed out, but at least a basic outline. And then I say it's going to be extemporaneous. There's going to be follow-ups. This needs to feel conversational. But we usually agree on an outline. I do have a few people that say, no outline, let's just talk. But that's rare. But that's not how our question for listeners work. And that's not how our In the News work. This is myself and other co-hosts. We just come on and we just agree to just be transparent and just be honest with you. And that's just really what we do. And in some ways it's really good because that's one way I can get ahead. Like that'd just be too many meetings, too much prep. There's no way we can have this much content. Like right now I'm 5 weeks ahead on the Monday, Thursday Audible podcast, and I'm 7 weeks ahead on the YouTube video. Now, how does all this relate to my statement about us coming on not having gone over everything for the QFL or the In the News? How do the two things relate? And not having thoroughly discussed them with other co-hosts and not knowing the views in advance. Well, this is how. Within the scope of recording, sometimes it becomes evident that we're not exactly totally on the same page. And that actually happened 6 times with all these recordings we've done in advance. And I'm sharing this with you because you're going to hear 6 spirited discussions / debates / back and forths. All of these are in August and September. So 3 of them are going to be on the Audible podcast and 3 are going to be on YouTube. And I think debates are just a great way to learn because as you hear both sides of an argument, it forces you to think through what you believe. But I'm going to do a little bit of a preview of whatever you want to call them, spirited discussions, point, counterpoint, or debates. So Monday, August 17th, Chris Terr and I have a good back and forth on Richard Kallenberg's book, Class Matters. So Richard argues that we've kind of missed the mark by focusing on race when we should have been focusing on class all along. And he's been saying that for 30 years. So yeah, we have a great debate on that. And then on Thursday, August 20th, which is also a Monday, which is a Thursday. And then on Monday, August 24th, Carter and I have a spirited back and forth. It's about an article Brendan Barnard wrote in Forbes entitled College Admissions Maxing, a Troubling Trend. So you're going to get 3 straight weeks. Well, I always say weeks, 3 straight episodes on the Audible podcast starting next Monday where you can hear the co-hosts debating amongst each other. And I can assure you this is not performative. This is not ESPN. This is not Fox. This is not Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith stirring up a fake controversy about how LeBron James is overrated to try to drive clicks. No, we just have a difference of opinion, and we talk it out, and I love it. We all respect each other. Everybody's coming from different opinions, but we're independent, and I love that my co-hosts are independent, and there's no group think in our group. We all have our own minds, and you're going to kind of get to see that on display. So those are the three that will be on the Audible podcast, August 17th, August 20th, August 24th, 3 straight episodes. And then on YouTube on September 8th, Susan and I have a really good spirited back and forth about whether admission officers read to admit. And then also on YouTube, the very next day, September 9th, Chris Tier and I have a spirited conversation about the classical learning test. And then finally, and this might be the most spirited one, we'll see. I think it's the longest one. Wednesday on YouTube, and this is the 16th, September 16th, so a week after the previous one, Carter and I, we debate demonstrated interest. We have a nice back and forth of demonstrated interest. So yeah, if you like debates and you like to learn that way, I can assure you all of them are authentic. Everybody's sort of representing what they believe, standing their ground, and we're talking through the issues. And I think you're going to enjoy it as a learning method. And you know what? If you guys really like it, I literally might try to, I don't like the word stage because that sounds so contrived, but I might try to set up and plan some debates in advance. I have, like, for example, I'm thinking of, I know Akil Bello would be happy to come on here and debate anyone protest, anti-test on the testing requirements. We could do one on that. I've just got some ideas percolating in my mind about some other topics. So, I want to kind of see what feedback we get on these 6. See if you guys like them or not. All right. If you're curious and you want to know what videos have been dropping on YouTube, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you any videos that have dropped since our Thursday episode. That you would have heard on last Thursday, right? So that would have been August 6th. So Hilly and I did a Grinding Your Gears video on students' poor communication with admission officers and why that really gets under our skin. And then we did a real deep dive on the case for affirmative action with Julie J. Park, one of the nation's foremost affirmative action scholars. I felt affirmative action has been misunderstood completely. And, we're in such an anti-diversity culture. I thought it needed a fulsome defense. And Julie J. Park gives that. So if you want to hear that, you can check that out. And then literally just before I came in here to record, Carter and I had a video go up on what are the pros and cons of applying early decision, point, counterpoint. We look at all angles of early decision. We kind of intentionally dropped this one this time because that's a conversation I'm getting a lot in the counseling room right now. So I think that's a good one if that's something you want to learn more about. And then on Tuesday, remember, we don't have videos the days we have Audible podcasts. So if you're hearing this Monday, there's no YouTube video. But on Tuesday, Christina and I have a very, very important conversation. And it's called, How Do I Know If a College is Affordable for My Family? How do I know if a college is affordable for my family? So, like I said, we kind of have 4 series up right now. We have a Grinding My Gears series. That's the one that Hillary and I did. We have a Frequently Asked Questions series, which all 3 of these videos here this week are in the Frequently Asked Questions section. We have an admissions tips and an admissions trend. So we kind of have 4 series going. And then there's one more video that's going to drop before next Thursday. And that video is entitled, How Do I Know Which Colleges I Should Visit? And that's with Susan. Susan joins me for that. So if you want to know the YouTube content, that's what we got coming up this week. So if you're brand new to this podcast and you don't know what I'm referring to when I keep referring to YouTube, here's an explanation. Friends, we are in year 9 of our podcast, but July 21st, 2026 was the most important day of our podcast history. On July 21st, we launched a brand new YourCollegeBoundKid.com website. As soon as an episode goes live, you can now listen on YourCollegeBoundKid.com instantaneously. And as soon as a YouTube video goes live, it is up on the new website. The website is cleaner. Interviews and the spotlights and past episodes are so much easier to navigate. Special shout out to a brother-sister team, Mary LaChance in Connecticut and John Rooney in New York, who, by the way, are volunteering their services to help us make college knowledge available to all and being our webmasters. You have to check out the new yourcollegeboundkid.com. The feedback so far on the new website has been off the charts. Effusive. Another thing happened on July 21st. We went from a Monday, Thursday Audible podcast to a daily podcast. We now have YouTube videos that drop every Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. That is every day we don't have an Audible podcast. Most of these videos are between 10 to 20 minutes, but every 6 videos, a long-form video, a deep dive with a thought leader in admissions or higher ed. Our Your College Bound Kid podcast YouTube channel is more than just a place to learn. It's a community forum, and we can use that comment section on YouTube to interact with each other and strengthen our bonds in our community. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Stuck. You're killing me. I mean, I love the pod, but 7 days a week? Are you serious? Thanks to Sony Patel from Kansas City, every one of those 5 days we drop a new YouTube video, she will send out a video trailer on Instagram that will preview the YouTube video that went live earlier that day. So you can take 60 seconds to watch the Instagram video trailer, and then you can decide if the 10 to 20 minute YouTube video is worth your time. Now, if you're not signed up for our Instagram, it's just at YCBK Podcast. That's at YCBK Podcast. One more time, that's at YCBK Podcast. We are excited and we look forward to interacting with you, our listening family, in the comment section on YouTube. All right, friends, we're going to transition to Christina and I taking a question from a dad from Denver.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Friends, Chris Terra is back. Hi, Chris.
Hello there, Mark. How are you?
Good. Friends, if you're a new listener, Chris is being a guest co-host here for me quite a bit right now as Julia's on sabbatical for almost another year, less than that. He's got extensive experience both on the school side, independent side, and he's done admissions. So, we like people on both sides of the desk. So you'll be seeing Chris a fair amount both on YouTube here on Your College Bound Kid. So just thanks in advance for your service, Chris.
You're most welcome, Mark. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I've got a great question today from Joe, a dad in Denver with 2 daughters. We're going to play the question and have a little short discussion.
Hi, Mark. This is Joe from Denver, a dad of 2 girls, rising senior and junior. I found your podcast about a year ago and have loved every minute of it, and am trying to self-educate as a DIYer. I truly feel that my wife and I are consultants in this process, and the girls are the CEO in this journey. After all, we've already had our own undergrad and graduate experiences. That said, I do want to be the best consultant possible for my daughters and give them any advice or tips that they may find useful when they're under the microscope of this college admission process. So after listening to the recent YouTube about ED1 and ED2 with Christina, I got to wondering, if a family doesn't have the financial means to feel comfortable applying ED or playing the ED game for one reason or another, be it financial, or maybe they can't narrow it down to one school, or they just really want to crunch the numbers or compare packages or whatnot, does it do the applicant any good to either apply along with the ED deadlines, but as our regular decision or an early action applicant at the time of alignment with those ED deadlines? Would the committee even pick up on such nuances? Would it demonstrate a level of interest that would matter, or would it even be noticed or glossed over in the process due to the sheer weight of applicants, especially at those top 20 schools that probably have an abundance of opportunities to pick from? Maybe even a school I'd be interested in knowing that doesn't offer ED, but if the student applied really early like that, would it be noticed? Would it make a difference? I know it's kind of a random nuance question, but I'm curious if it would even move the needle one way or another at any of the schools. Anyway, I love what you're doing with your website and your new YouTube channel and all the content that you're recording, and look forward to continuing to listen. Cheers and best of luck.
All right, Chris, what were your thoughts when you heard this question? Let's say this was a client of yours, client dad, who asked you this question. Well, what would you say to him?
I would say, Joe, God bless you for loving your daughters and taking care of them the way you are, and thinking of yourself as a consultant to the CEOs who are really in the lead. That's a very important aspect of all this, that the students take the lead because it's really their journey. With regard to the specific notion of your question, if I understand it, it's you don't want to apply a pre-committed early decision. You aren't sure If the place is exactly right, you might want to look at other offers. The reason to apply pre-committed early decision is when the student and the parents can get head, heart, and wallet in alignment, where you know it's got everything you want. You feel the place is right for you and the money's going to make sense. And if you're not in that position and you're thinking about, well, would it help to apply regular decision but send it in earlier? My sense of it is no, it would not. When I was a university admissions officer, I spent all of September, all of October on the road, visiting schools, doing college fairs, doing evening events, meeting students in Starbucks. And the last thing I was going to do is read any applications before the deadline. And when you're off the road, you read the early decision, you read the early action, because you've got to make decisions about those first. The early decision, you have to be back to the students in December. Early action, maybe December, sometimes it's January. And then you deal with the regular decision when it's time for regular decision. So I think it's a well-intentioned thought on your part, but in what I saw in selective college admissions, I don't think there's any advantage to be gained by sending things in earlier in the way I think you suggest.
Yeah, I would agree with Chris's sentiments. By the way, we all do this in admission and counseling. We all beg, borrow, and steal. That sounds so crass, but we all borrow from each other. I'm going to borrow a line from you there, Chris, that I really loved when you talked about the goal is to get the head, heart, and wallet all aligned in the same place. That was priceless. I don't know if you came up with that or you took that from somebody, but I'm stealing it.
The Council for the Advancement of Secondary Education, CASE, was long ago nicknamed Copy and Steal Everything. So
there you go. There you go. So I would agree with what Chris said, because the question you asked, Joe, you were clearly talking about an admissions advantage. In other words, that was a clear implication in how I think Chris and I both interpreted it. Will this increase my chances? I'm just going to add a little bit of nuance. So one thing that I find can be incredibly helpful for students is just getting stuff submitted and done and getting it off your chest. It's part of stress relief. And this applies to a lot of things. This applies when kids get their test score and they finally hit their score and they're done. It applies when they get their personal statement done and it's submitted and it's done, or when they're done visiting their schools or when they've turned in their last application. So I do think that, and Chris, by the way, is over here nodding, agreeing with me. We're recording this on Riverside, a video platform, even that you'll hear this as an audio. So I think there's some personal benefit, and I don't think it's insignificant. Of course, this is assuming that you're putting a quality application together and you put the time and proofed it and done all that, assuming all those things are true. I would throw that in. And so I do recommend, sometimes my students say, I'm completely done. It's everything. Should I submit or should I wait? I tell them submit. Of course, once again, that's assuming it's been proofed, and I don't want you going back and regretting something later. Right. The only other thing that I would add to this, and I know Chris knows this because we've talked about this both on the air or off the air. And I've been recently talked with you guys on this podcast with Andy Strickler. Colleges are getting very sophisticated at their predictive modeling that they're doing. And they're trying, like I was explaining to students and parents, do you ever find it hard knowing what your 16, 17, or 18-year-old is going to do? Everybody nods profusely. Well, what if your job depended on predicting the behavior of 5,000 18-year-olds? And you got to get the right number of heads in beds, and you can't over-enroll. Where do you put them? You can't under-enroll because you lose your job and you don't meet the budget. So schools are using third-party quants, paying them big money. Some schools I know even have as many as 3 different people they pay to crunch these numbers and to try to come up with forecasting. If it was true that a school found that somebody who turned in an application early through a non-binding round had a better chance of yielding, then it's possible that could be something that they're cognizant of. I have a lot of caveats in there. I said if, and I said possible. I think, I'll share one quick story and then I'll see if Chris agrees with me on that. Because you guys know how we do it. We don't talk about these things ahead of time. We just come in here and independently express our thoughts. In fact, I'm going to give a little tease out here. Hillary and I had our first ever debate on the podcast, and you're going to hear that in a YouTube video in September. So we come in and we have different views. We have different views and we share them. So we just ask that everyone be authentic. That's what we ask of you as applicants, and that's what I ask all the co-hosts to do. Not to have groupthink, but just to share your honest opinion. So here's my story. I'm even going to name the school. So I was on a counselor fly-in to a group of schools in the Pacific Northwest. bunch of small liberal arts schools like Whitman and Puget Sound. Then they went over to Willamette and got Lewis and Clark and Reed. So those were the 5 schools. They're a little bit of a loose consortium. They're not a consortium in the sense that you can't take courses at the same time at they're hours apart from each other. But they travel together as a group a little bit, and they do some collective events, and so they can split the cost when they fly as counselors in. And then thanks to shout out Jeff Teraday, who's been on this podcast before. When I did the law school overview, Jeff Teraday was on that podcast as one of the expert partner lawyers that I had on there to take students from questions. Jeff showed me around for about 4 or 5 hours, and so we also ended up hitting Seattle U and UW. But anyway, I digress. When I was at the UPS fly-in, the UPS is, that's an acronym for University of Puget Sound. We just kind of call it UPS. So one of the things that they said, and I partly hesitate to say this, Chris, because this is one of these things that when you try to be transparent and you divulge something like this, you might be raising some people's blood pressure. But I'm going to do it anyway. They said, you know what we have found in our predictive modeling is a really good predictor of someone who's going to come? Somebody who has been engaged with us since the 9th grade in some concept, in some shape or form. Whether you
had to go there, did you?
Yeah, I know. I just raised blood pressure.
Ninth grade.
They said that could be request. You requested information. You visited. You came by a fair. We came by your school. But we have found that is actually a really good predictor of who will come without a binding decision. And I'm only saying this because it is possible in this age of sophisticated metrics that a school has concluded that the student that turns in an application earlier has a higher interest level in us. Now, they wouldn't likely do that in isolation. That would likely be backed up by other things like your web traffic, and maybe other things like you attended a virtual, presentation or an on-site visit. It's unlikely to be done in isolation, but it is possible because, there's some things that I can't get admission officers sometimes to say on the air. Sometimes they'll say it off the air, but schools are getting really sophisticated with tracking your web traffic. If they notice that a student is hanging out in the enrollment section a lot, summer orientation, what do I do? Deposits, healthcare. They can conclude this is a fish that's on the line that we might be able to reel in. And so one of the reasons why I've had some schools say to me that they like early action is because not only does it help divide the reading load up earlier, but by getting somebody kind of into our pool earlier, we have more time to cultivate them, maybe get them back on campus. Maybe we're in the area. We can get them out to an event and we have a better chance of putting a yield strategy together. So
I completely agree, with everything you're saying, that the early action and the growth in early action is both a benefit to the students along the lines of your just get your best possible application in early and off your to-do list. And it benefits the institution because they do have that opportunity to do more to try to yield the students. I think Joe's question, I thought, had to do primarily with if it's just regular decision, do you send it in earlier? And, I don't perceive an advantage, but with all the metrics you're describing, perhaps the data collection is doing that. I'm fearful of your mention of what you mentioned in 9th grade will do to the stress levels of listeners.
I know.
But, if it's a real thing, it's a real thing. And,
let's say this to try to, because, this is an important point, Chris. I don't want to do that, but I'm trying to strike this balance between transparency, but not raising blood pressure. So let me say this. I feel that would be very rare for a school to be honing in on that, at least from my understanding of things. So I don't want people to go away and say, everybody's doing this 9th grade thing test now.
It's the first time I've ever heard of that kind of thing. I've heard a lot, including from Andy Strickler, about, how much they measure all this. I just had a conversation with a great veteran at Tufts last week about the depth of engagement that they seek, not just the clicks, but the depth of really digging into the programming they have and really attending the webinars and finding the substantive opportunities that are in there, not just the clicks. Because there are, with everybody being so busy, I have had students or parents admit to me that, Mom is clicking through the links,
Sure.
when the student is doing other more important things. So trying to predict yield is an absolutely essential part of what these people are trying to do, as you put it, to get the right number of heads and beds. You can't blame them for trying to track it, but try to make it as substantive and as authentic in your engagement as possible.
That's really important.
Yeah, don't just do it for the sake. Don't just do it for the sake of doing it. Do it because you're genuinely curious about the place. You really want to know more about it. Oh, by the way, if there are supplementary essays, you may need not simply to have demonstrated interest, but be able to demonstrate understanding of what's unique about a particular place and why it's right for you. So use it as an opportunity to learn, and keep your list under control. So you're not trying to do this at up to 20 or more places, because that's absurd.
Yeah, the point well taken. Demonstrating understanding is really important. And especially the more you move up the selectivity tier, the more that's going to be the focus is going to be, did you get who we are? Did you make a compelling case that you're a match for who we are? That's going to be important. And so, yeah, well, thank you, Joe, for your question, and good luck raising your daughters. Thank you, Chris, for your contributions, and we'll look forward. Well, you and I got one coming up here next week as well. So I look forward to chatting with you again here. We got one coming up about a Wall Street Journal article that recently ran that a lot of you listeners are sending it to me and saying, you're going to talk about it on the podcast? And Chris was even one of the ones who sent it to me to talk about. So I said Chris would be a great person to chat it up with. So look forward to having Chris back really shortly to discuss that one. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Look forward to it.
All right, friends. Hopefully you enjoyed that conversation that Chris and I had. But it's time for the final part of my interview and Christina's interview, because she joined me with Andrea Saadi, part 3 of 3, looking at college affordability.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, we've reached our final part of our interview that Christina and I did with Andrea Saadi. And we're discussing how you can know whether or not a college is financially stable and what are some of the methods that experts use when they do this type of assessment. In part 3, Andrea discusses how athletic expenses impact college budgets. Andrea gives her opinion on whether she is expecting widespread closures of colleges across the country, like some of the experts are saying is going to happen. Andrea discusses how the report that she generates from all her research, how is it used? Andrea gives her opinion on Forbes College Financial Grades. Andrea gives us more signs to look for to know if a college signals they are in trouble. Andrea comments briefly about 990s. Andrea shares if she believes a college that gives merit money to everyone, is that a sign of financial weakness? And finally, Andrea goes on the hot seat. Listen and enjoy.
I'm not an athletics director. I don't know the right size for certain varsity teams, but I feel like these are things that, you might be able to just suss out if you dig a little bit further. And these things are generally disclosed on universities' websites. They like to, have their athletics teams and their facilities, and they showcase them because, again, they're using this as an enrollment draw. They're getting students to want to come here, commit, right? Everything's about the commitment post and being able to play at the varsity level, and it's great. It is an absolutely fantastic enrollment strategy. It's just, it could quickly tip into being the thing that the school is relying on, and that it's costing them. It's when they're relying on it, but that the net tuition revenue is not growing proportionally because athletics becomes a drain, right? And so
I have an example.
That's an indicator that they're buying enrollment, right?
I have an example. So of just how complex this is. So in my regular listeners know who've been listening for a while, but in late 2024, September, October, I went to California for 9 days on this college flying program called Oktoberfest. And when I was there, September, October 2022. And when I was there, one of the colleges we visited was Whittier College. Now, I grabbed the school newspaper like I always do. Listeners, when you're on a tour, grab the school newspaper. I will never forget this. There were 11 pages in the school newspaper. Every single page was dedicated to the fact that Whittier dropped their football team, which was like over 100 years old, and students were incensed. And of course, there, some of it was, why weren't we told this? We came here, blah, blah, blah. But I can just see, a lot of the rationale was, this is way too expensive. So like these are really hard decisions, right? So the school felt like we needed to make this decision from a budget standpoint, but then there's also students, but that's a big part of my student experience. And so like these are really hard decisions.
Very difficult.
But every single page was like students speaking out, angry. But at the same time, do you keep drowning, like at some point? And we're seeing this all over, right? West Virginia, public school, they cut lots and lots of programs. University of Indiana, there's a lot of, now I know that they've recently had an insurgence with their success in football, but there were a ton of programs that they laid off that had low enrollment. Looks like you want to say something. Andrea?
I was going to say the sports piece is also complicated because of all the changes with NCAA and the NIL and the litigation. Yeah. And so that's a lot of those program cuts that are happening at the D1 level are directly tied to compliance with the D1 changes, the NCAA litigation, and having to retroactively pay athletes and come up with revenue source now that they didn't previously have. And so unless it's a revenue generating sport, which in most instances is like only really football and basketball, all the other sports are more of a liability. And the schools are trying to figure out, how do I meet, there's roster limits now that have got imposed and scholarships and again, the paying of the athletes. And so that's its own separate sort of budget conundrum at that level. For the concerning piece for the sort of the budget side on the smaller, more D3 that don't have roster limits, but actually have rosters that are bigger than some of the big D1 schools, right? Those are the cases where you just start to look at, wow, this school has some really amazing facilities, and it makes you think and want to sort of just look and dig further. It's in and of itself not an issue and not an indicator of a problem per se, but it's just another tool to sort of look at to see, is this school struggling to meet enrollment, and are they using athletics as a way to draw students? And it's fine as long as it remains profitable.
It's just tricky. I remember some years ago, both Stanford and Dartmouth got rid of some programs because some of these schools have like 20, like lots of different programs, right? And it's a lot of spots that are going to athletes. But a lot of times that's really controversial because there's backlash from a lot of people saying, why are so many spots going to athletes? And, you'll see backlash from people who really care a lot about diversity, because a lot of times that is not adding diversity, socioeconomic, racial, and other types of diversity. But then sometimes schools will say, like, some of our oldest, biggest alumni will go ballistic. Like, they played this sport, they're 65 and they're our big donors. So a lot of times that's linked to fundraising. So we dare not pull this poll. You can't just say this niche sport is losing revenue, but because we have like donors that, will stop giving if we yank that program. So I don't want to make this all about athletics. I just wanted to point out how complex athletics is. Let me ask a different question, Andrea. There are some leading voices out here that are really, really sounding the alarm. Some even saying they're anticipating like 400 schools to close, in the next decade or so. Like, that's how bad things are, without putting numbers on it, because nobody really knows. Schools can have, sometimes money comes out of nowhere when a school's about to close and the alumni, shake the trees in a way that they hadn't before. But are you in the camp that feels, it's really, really bad and we have way too many colleges and I don't see a lot of these schools making it? Or are you more in the camp of they're going to figure out a way to survive?
Somewhere in the middle. I think it's totally plausible that we could hit maybe not the 400 number, but definitely a large number. I feel like there have been alarms that have been sounded in prior years or prior decades about other crises that are definitely different than this one. And colleges have managed to survive through it. Colleges are really, really old institutions, and they've managed to figure out ways to pivot and adapt. But that being said, this time does feel different just because it's not just the demographic cliff. I think it's coming at a time when so many other things are also hitting the institutions at once. And so the demographic cliff was widely signaled for many, many years. And so institutions should have had it on their radar, and they should have been planning and thinking about it. And they should have had, good management and governance should have been strategizing and budgeting for it and planning accordingly. And building reserves for, the rainy day, those types of things. But there are just so many things that are happening now that I don't think that anyone could have planned for or foreseen. And they're all just happening at once. So it does feel different, but how it's all going to shake out, that's above my pay grade to predict. I do think, though, that, there's definitely going to be more closures. The pace of closures will definitely continue. Probably to accelerate, but I think it's going to be, again, those smaller, more rural, more remote schools. And hopefully, there'll be situations where the more people are talking about it, the more they can identify ways to either repurpose the school, reinvent themselves, merge. There are schools that are growing, and those schools are picking off selectively where to expand and establish their brand in another geographic region. And so that might be the case. That saves a handful of them where it's just, partnering and using that brand strength and establishing that a satellite location that's not dissimilar to student wanting to study abroad in Europe. Maybe they're going to study abroad in like Vanderbilt. They're going to study abroad in New York. And perhaps that will be the next trend.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do a report, who pays for you, and where do your reports go to? Like, are you?
It's all internal. Yeah, it's all internal, and it's I work for the portfolio manager or the fund that is looking to buy that debt as part of a diverse portfolio of other municipal bonds, tax exempt municipal bonds, and so they're going to be invested in lots of different sectors, and then diversity just within that portfolio of higher education. But
so they're assessing. You're part of the risk assessment to see if the investment is stable and worth it.
Exactly. At the price and at the levels, right? So there's all the other talk about the bond rating is tied to the interest rate that the market is going to demand, right? Which is tied to the risk of that institution's repayment. So a single B entity is considered non-investment grade. They're going to command a much higher interest rate investors to actually loan that institution money versus lending to a AAA institution, which has, very little risk and enormous financial resources.
So I have a question on that, and then I know Christina has a question. So one simple thing I know the public can look at and understand are these are these ratings like Moody's, S&P, they do put out their ratings for schools.
Forbes has a list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is that something that you think the public should pay attention to?
Yes, definitely. If the debt is rated, though, right? So there's, the institution has to actually be an issuer of public debt. And then they have to have actually gone and gotten a bond rating. And if they're not a frequent issuer, then they might not maintain that rating every year. So again, it depends. Typically, if you are an issuer of debt and you maintain your rating, you typically tend to be a higher rated entity just because by nature of the industry itself. So when investors are reading through bond rating documents, if they pay for a subscription or they can get something on Google or whatever, it's typically going to be the institutions that are facing either a budget, more of no budget crunch whatsoever, or a manageable budget crunch. It's unlikely that they're going to come across a rated entity that is suffering so severely. Those tend to be sort of the smaller population, if you will, of the public debt outstanding.
Well, let me take it off of just the bond ratings. Like Christina brought up, like Forbes has their financial tracker, which encompasses multiple statistics beyond just the Moody or S&P, bond rating. Have you looked at that at all? And what are your thoughts on the public using that as a tool?
I guess it's a good starting point. I have looked at it, and I think that there are definitely going to be outliers and anomalies on there where a school has gotten a higher rating on Forbes than I might have otherwise thought that it would have deserved. And I don't mean I'm not trying to align it towards a rating agency rating. It's just more along the lines of, oh, I don't know that I would have said that was, an A. I think that I would, in order to more confidently answer that question, I would have to go through and more fully understand their methodology and what actual metrics they're looking at on the financial side. Because again, a deep dig into the financial statements is really one of the things that I do. And I calculate so many different ratios. And so I just don't know exactly what it is that they're using and what their methodology is and how they came upon those ratings. But I think it's definitely a good start. And then again, using the CDS profile is fantastic for finding the information on the enrollment durability and merit aid and those types of things. News and institutional actions, just reading the student newspaper. One announcement isn't necessarily alarming. It's really several that occur together that would indicate some stress patterns, academic major, elimination of majors, faculty layoffs, hiring freezes, budget cuts. Again, keeping in mind that some of these can signal prudent budgetary management. But you just start to get a gut feeling when you're like, this one is more alarming. Are they discussing a merger? Are there accreditation warnings? Are there entire departments being consolidated? And then understanding the whys. Dormitory closures. We didn't talk about that, but housing occupancy sometimes can also be sort of a signal up there in the enrollment durability and things like that. If there's too much housing, that's, similar to too much athletic facilities. Those are typically financed with debt. And if housing occupancy is low, you could have an issue of freshman retention rate issue, high rate of transfers, those types of things. Those all kind of just signal some potential weaknesses or stress. I think it's the IRS Form 990. I'm not super familiar with reading those. I don't know that they're definitely not as comprehensive as audited financials. They can probably provide some valuable insight, but I think that they're probably harder to read or just dig through because they're not even in a great format that makes them sort of readable. Like executive compensation and some fundraising. And I just don't know that it's as consistent and, again, comprehensive as an audited financial. That would probably be the best. And I don't think IPED's data either provides as much financial information as, as an analyst, as an investor would want. I don't think that that's going to signal any immediate financial concerns, especially because IPED's data also has an even larger lag than audited financials.
All right, Christina, I think you had a question.
Well, I did, kind of going back to the Forbes College Grades. You have some schools here that are well known, like Barnard has a B+. You've got Georgetown that has a B. How would a family even look at that? Is a B bad? And in my mind, if I got a B in college, I'm okay, right? But is there a certain point where you would say okay, these grades, I'd be a little bit more concerned?
I'd like to be able to come back and answer that question because I don't know enough about the Forbes methodology and exactly what they're looking at and then how they weight each factor. So if I think about the way a rating agency does it, they've got several factors, right? The demand and enrollment profile, the operating performance, the size of the balance sheet, the debt profile, management, right? Those are all big factors. And then within them, they have sub factors. And then the way that they come to a rating, it's very, very formulaic and standardized, but each one of those has a certain weight. And so for the Forbes, I just don't know how much relative weight is being given to whatever metrics they're using. And I don't know that the metrics that they're using, especially for the financials, is something that I would tend to agree is being the gold standard or the thing that I would look at to be able to then confidently answer that question. I'm so sorry.
That's fair.
Okay.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
I will say when I look at them, overall, I think they're pretty good, but I absolutely see outliers that are head scratchers on there where I feel like I know two institutions well enough to say there's no way that school's more financially sound than this one. I do see that in there. So it is not gospel. I'm I think it's worth consulting, but it
Mhm.
is not gospel. And I think anybody who uses them needs to know that's not a perfect metric. It just is not.
Right.
It's just not.
And
Mhm.
I don't think any one metric is a perfect metric or
Yeah.
that there is
Yeah.
necessarily one place to get the information. There are lots of different ways to get it. And it's just a matter of interpreting it and just having a gut feeling. I mean, sometimes just by knowing what we talked about, like the broad general factors are enough to get a sense as to whether or not you get a feeling that a university is in trouble. Like, especially if you go to visit a place and you can just look around and see like there's deferred maintenance or things just aren't being kept up, or there's just a handful of different ways to observe it without having to necessarily do a deep dive into 10 years of financial statements, which is, what the professionals are doing for assessing, public debt and borrowing.
Is one troubling sign for you, Andrea? There are schools that give merit money to everybody, and like sometimes it's north of 20,000, right? So they're just, and we know what they're doing. They're sort of saying, and they're probably right from the research, that if we list our price $30,000 less than our competitors, people will think we're not that good. So they try to price somewhat close to their competitors, but they can't demand that in the marketplace. So then they just shave 20 or 25 or 30 off for everybody. Is obvious the schools that have the most demand don't do that. Is that one of those signs for you that's a little troubling when it's merit money for everybody and it's like 20K or more?
Not necessarily. It's the trend. And what is the pattern? Have they historically always done this? And is it working? So, is net tuition revenue growing, right? If the enrollment increases, but the net tuition revenue doesn't, then this is where they run into trouble, where your expenses are going to be outpacing your revenues, and you're going to just be in this constant series of depleting capacity, where financial resources that balance sheet is going to be used to offset any of the income statement losses. So in and of itself, not an issue, because I totally understand like the psyche around the discount and but like the word merit as opposed to, just a tuition discount helps somebody mentally say, oh, okay, we earned this. Like, I don't philosophically have an issue with that. I think it's just more along the lines of like that pattern and is it working?
I mean, net tuition revenue to me is extremely important. I'm thinking of a conversation I had with somebody very recently. I can't name the school, but it's a chief enrollment officer who said to me, on paper, we look like we've increased our enrollment for 10 years in a row, but inside we've been bleeding money. Because they've had to discount so much to get that enrollment that they're actually hurting, and they have a pretty healthy endowment. So that's what saved them from being like a kind of in danger school. And they even said, if we didn't have the endowment we have, we'd be, we'd get crushed. But on paper, a lot of people can look at it and think, and admission officers are good at touting that because they're everybody wants to sort of look like they're successful, because then it's even harder to attract students if you look like you're not successful. So like there's a lot of press releases that go out championing the increased largest class ever and all this stuff. But meanwhile, they've been bleeding money for years and years in a row. And so, and I remember I interviewed a president of a small college on the podcast a while ago, and he's like, enrollment means nothing to me. Like, anybody can be full if you give the whole thing away. So, he kind of reinforced that as well. Like, let me see your numbers and see if you're bringing in more money. I really need to see that. That to me is more important than enrollment growth.
Right. Absolutely. The same thing with the application growth that we were talking about earlier. I feel like that seems to be a headline that schools like to tout, is a record number of applications, getting that acceptance rate lower, whatever it is, whatever their barometer is for that. But it doesn't tell me a whole lot if it wasn't organic.
All right. We're about to wind down. Any last questions on your mind, Christina?
No, this has been fascinating.
Yeah.
I
Thank you.
I think there's
I hope I didn't go into the weeds too much.
No. This is good. I think it'll be interesting to see over the next couple years. One thing that you mentioned about, there was a lot of lead in for the enrollment cliff. We knew about it for a while and the saving and all of that. However, what we didn't anticipate was the pandemic and how that affected the budget lines of schools. So just as you're recovering from that, now we're hitting this. And I think those two things combined for a lot of schools is going to dictate how this rolls on in the next couple of years.
Well, you know what's scary is, anytime there's financial crisis, there tend to be less births, right? And so we knew that we're going to have this enrollment slide or enrollment cliff birth, or call it what you want, because we could look at 07, 09, great financial crisis, and fast forward 18 years out. Well, birth rates went down again in COVID. So when you look at those projections, there's expected to be another drop like 2038. And while that's not now, it's, how fast time flies, like 12 years is going to be here pretty soon.
Right.
And so colleges have to really figure things out and then also the more the country goes into debt, the less likely that you're going to see a lot of more federal funding for education, right? And the more states struggle with outmigration and other things. I mean, there's a lot that's been written about the fact that it's really hard for higher ed to get a lot of the state dollars because, like, there's so many, you've got pensions and roads and bridges and cops, and then even K-12, like, the thinking has been a lot of times, like, parents will find a way to figure out for college, whereas, like, K-12, we need to, not that it's all K-12, but there are a lot of other things that hit the budget that oftentimes feel like they have more urgency. And that's been a trend for a long time for states to pull back their investment in their public colleges.
And
Andrea?
then just to your point on parents going to be able to figure it out. Well, now they're not in a position to figure it out with all of the federal loan changes. So their hands have been tied in that one area that, leadership has said, they can, find other ways. We'll cut and they'll close the gap somewhere else. So,
and all that's correlated to me to the value people place on college too. Because the more you find it valuable, the more you'll be resourceful. I mean, I see it every day. I see people that tell me for such and such school, I'll come up with $100,000. And then this school over here, they're like, I can't pay 40 for. Like I see it all the time. And so like, I see the consumer telling me when I think something has value, I'll make it work. And when I don't, I'm not paying. So anyway, fascinating conversation. You know this because you're a podcast listener. You can't get away without going on the hot seat. You ready for a couple of lightning round questions?
Sure.
That long pause means no. Or
No.
it means depends what the question is.
I'm thinking through my recollection of prior questions and going, I didn't really think about how I would answer these.
Yeah, now you're on, and I'm going to make it easy for you, and I'm going to use some of my oldies and my goodies too. So how do you relax? How do you chill? How do you unwind?
Spend time with the family, work out. I enjoy working out. I enjoy running. I enjoy lifting. Just, again, going to the beach, reading.
And you're a walker. You say you listen to our podcast while walking. Didn't you say that? You're a walker?
Yeah. I like to go out for a walk. I live in Brooklyn, right in Bay Ridge. Beautiful, view of the Verrazano and a great bike path. And I just, I do a lot of that. Listen to it on the commute if I'm doing that. Just, yeah.
All right. This is one of my old true goodies. What do you wish your 18-year-old self knew?
Well, I guess I can liken it to a career path or whatever, that whatever you think your school fit is or where you're going in life, it's never linear. Nothing ever is linear. Athletic performance is not linear, those types of things. And so there's always going to be, a curving, winding path towards something. And to just always embrace it and be willing to accept what you've, what's in front of you and take on the challenge and continue to, find new ways to excel.
There you go. What's your favorite vacation you ever took?
That's a hard one.
You're a traveler.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to some neat places. I wouldn't say tons of different places, but I mean, a great vacation was Disney with my kids for the first time, but also not the most relaxing vacation, right?
Sure.
So,
No.
Great vacations, to Greece or to Italy, just, embracing culture and food and just seeing new sights.
There you go. I'll make the last one the easy one. Well, maybe this will be hard. Someone's coming to Brooklyn. What's your restaurant recommendation?
Tangerine. It is Middle Eastern, Arabic, and it is one of the most amazing restaurants and very highly rated and absolutely delicious. And we're friends with the family, but that's not why I'm plugging it. It's just such a wonderful restaurant.
Andrea, thank you so much for coming on and being so generous.
Thank you
Christina,
so
thanks
much.
for joining us last minute.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure. I appreciate it. Thank you
Awesome.
both so much.
My pleasure. All right. All the best. All right, friends. I've really been enjoying having Chris on the podcast, and I'm going to say a little bit more about why I have been having him on a decent amount in an upcoming session he's going to do. But just so you know, on Thursday's episode, Chris is back, and we're taking hot topics in the news. Yep. We haven't had a hot topic in the news in a while, and you're going to get two back-to-back. One with Chris and then another with Carter. So we're looking at an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal called "The Fraud Squad at Caltech Will Catch You If You Lie on Your Application." What a great title. So we're going to be talking about that article. And then, friends, right now, I've been monitoring the numbers closely. 1 in 10 of our Audible listeners are going over to YouTube and also becoming YouTube watchers. So I'm going to let you hear an interview that first aired on YouTube because only 10% of you will have heard it. It's with Bill Deresiewicz. He's a New York Times best-selling author, former Yale professor for 10 years. He was also at Columbia for a little while. And he wrote a book called Excellent Sheep, about his experience with students at Yale and Columbia in the Ivy League. And so you're going to hear part 1 of 2 if you tune in on Thursday for that. And friends, if you've seen any YouTube videos or if you've ever had a meeting with me, you know I have all of these. I got a lot going on behind my background. So yeah, my daughter Joy basically turned our house into like a Black History museum one summer. It's kind of cool. It's a conversation starter anytime somebody comes here, and it's behind my office. And there's a frame of one picture, and it's right by the flowers, and it's by Martin Luther King. And I've never shared this quote ever, and I'm share it with you now in closing. And it simply says this: "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Martin Luther King. I guess all of us can think about what is it in my life that I'm being silent on, that I need to speak truth to power. All right, friends. See you on Thursday. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about YCBK on social media. And you help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating at yourcollegeboundkid.com and clicking the donate button. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. If you have a question or suggestion, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak, and we will do our best to get your question or your comment in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I'm the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admission and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-host, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, 2 admission officers from Colorado, Hillary Dickman from Colorado College, Kate Strickland from CU Boulder, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, Heath Einstein, the Chief Enrollment Officer at TCU in Fort Worth, Carter DeLauro, a co-director of college counseling in New York, and Christina Lopez, the former Dean of Admission at Barnard College, and our international college specialist, Kevin Newton from Dallas, Texas. Our stupendous sound engineer who makes everything happen is Nemanja Matvic from Serbia. Our reliable webmaster is John Rooney. Website updates are done by Joy Stucker. Image editing by Vlad Honchar. And what would we do without our volunteers? Guy Pillsbury, Sony Patel, and Andy Bernstein are all helping us with podcast marketing. Carolyn Wood, Mark Doniger, and Carrie Roberts book interviews with thought leaders. Amanda Dugan, Colleen Sinoki, Nicole Resch, Trevor Smith, Ryan Stepler, and Lynn Labash send thank yous to interviewees. If you want a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly newsletter, YCBK Plus, it's also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights and our upcoming events and receptions. And you can now do searches for past content by using our new Explore and Topics tabs. We really encourage you to explore our past content. We have close to 1,000 hours. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.